Yeah.
He said good.
Which is fine, but they're over there.
Phone was sitting there the whole time.
Yeah, good.
That happened to me once, maybe twice, when I was commuting to East Castle to the yard.
Yeah.
Here, this is not a formal meeting, so we're not working off of those rules and procedures. It's just a presentation. The thought came up, I think over the last couple of years in different ways, that it would be good to have a conversation about the final budget that's going to be on the town warrant before we get to town meeting, and give everybody a chance to think about any questions they might have, all that kind of thing. So the warrant is, the warrant is put to bed. It's in the process right now, probably at the attorney's office, being reviewed, is that correct?
The attorney has sent it back to us, and we are just eliminating any of the red marks that he provided, and then it will be on the select board agenda for final signage next week.
So that's a long way of saying we're not here to talk about any changes to the budget tonight. It's past that time. That ship has sailed, as it were. But hopefully if there's any questions, we can help answer them. So we're gonna have 3 presentations, and then there'll be time for questions and conversation at the end of that. Please hold your questions until the end. And the finance committee is gonna go first and talk about the work they've been doing for the past year, which is.
He's all.
Say it again?
He's all.
The school committee.
Yeah,
I meant to say the school's going to go first. And then the finance committee, and yes, Carol.
Could the school committee join us up front?
Yeah. I don't know how, but yes.
Just bring a chair.
Yeah. Well, you guys get to see the thing, we don't even get to see it. Yeah. Good move, Carol. So yeah, when the finance committee comes up, they'll be talking about work that's been done in the past less than a year. That's the kind of work that we haven't had being done for a while, and it's been extremely helpful in terms of long-term planning. Welcome. Grab some paper if you want. We're just getting started. And Aaron, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Aaron Townsend. I'm the superintendent for the Shawinigan Island School Department. First town budget forum, so excited to be here. We'll go through a few slides here, talking about the school budget that's been approved. It was initially approved by the school committee on April 15th with one amendment at our most recent meeting on May 6th. So that's all part of the town budget package at this point. So first, before we get into the financials, just to kind of share a little bit of kind of like what's happening at the school. So first, this is a chart, presentation that shows our historical and projected future resident enrollment, so students on Shawinigan Island. So you can see in the gray column in the middle, we're anticipating actually 13 students pre-K to 5 at the school next year. The one student in 6th grade in yellow is actually going to remain with us for next year as a 6th grader. So it'll be 14 Island students at the Shawinigan Island School. And then between Harrison Middle School and Yarmouth High School, we'll have 11 students that are Shawinigan Island residents that will be traveling over and attending that we project in the Yarmouth School Department next year. Looking a little bit more, people may be familiar that this year we've had a pilot of having a few students from the mainland join our school community. So here, looking more specifically at the Shawinigan Island School enrollment projections for next year, you can see we're looking to grow by about 6 students. So that's both increasing the number of mainland students who we'll have coming out. So we're currently have tuition agreements with 9 students to attend next year, and then our 14 resident students for a total population of 23 next year. So excited to have those numbers. Yeah. We've done a little bit of work, just briefly, in terms of what we do at Shawinigan Island School. These are the kinds of attributes we engage with parents and school committee members and staff earlier this year to help kind of define through the school's vision and mission, what are those kinds of outcomes and dispositions we want for students. So these are the ones that we've identified in our school kind of program is helping to, or working to develop in students over their time with us. And lastly, this is obviously in the budget, but just want to kind of name the staffing that we have this year to support our students and kind of deliver that school program at Shawinigan Island School. So by and large, fairly similar to last year. And as we'll talk about, there are some additions within the special education team in terms of special education ed tech and some related service providers increases in time. So overall, in terms of budget for this coming year, our proposed expenditures for FY26 would be $1.178 million. This is an 8.4% reduction from last year, primarily due to reduced debt service payments to MSAB 51 and decreases in secondary tuition and transportation costs. I'll note, and we'll talk about this a little bit further as we look at some of the cost centers, despite some of those big structural changes that are producing the reduction, there are some increases in staffing expenses as I said, related to some required special education services that we need to provide, and just kind of some annual salary and benefit increases for staff. On the revenue side, our non-local proposed revenue is just over $160,000 for next year. So this represents a significant increase from FY25, almost 75% increase. And as we look at that later, it'll be, we have some increases kind of across the board, both in our state aid, the amount we receive in terms of reimbursements for our breakfast and lunch program, federal special education grant, and now budgeting for that tuition from the mainland students who will attend at CIS next year. So in sum, that means on the school side of the budget for FY26, the local contribution is just over $1 million, which is, approaching a 15% reduction from the prior year. This is just a table of those numbers, kind of comparing FY25 to FY26. So the gray column is the numbers I was just speaking to on the prior slide. So you can see our expenditures are down just over $100,000, with our revenue up, $68,000, $69,000, and the kind of requirement for the local taxpayers down, $176,000. Looking for a minute, just kind of historically over the past 8 years in terms of budgets, because of some of those significant shifts, the debt service relief that we're starting to see and some of the tuition changes, we're down to, this is kind of the second lowest budget, in the past 8 years. So it's down somewhat significantly from prior years, but as you can see, there have been ebbs and flows over the course of the year. Certainly, some of the additional funding, I presume, from the pandemic time influenced things in the 2021-22 range. So we are kind of resetting, as we'll kind of talk about with the change in debt service, kind of the baseline for the school budget, kind of moving forward with the relief of that debt service payment. Again, I think this has been shared historically, just to kind of, give some context of where Shahid sits in terms of education expenditure compared to other somewhat similar communities, both island communities and mainland communities. So you can see, really, in many respects, we kind of sit right in the middle. These figures come from kind of the state calculations. These are from 2 years ago. These are the costs from FY24. So not this current year, right, but the prior year in terms of the fiscal budget. So we sit kind of right in the middle comparatively from some of the island communities and then some of the adjacent, kind of mainland communities, Yarmouth and SAB 51 listed there. As we start to look at our expenditures a little bit more closely by the, by the cost center, this is just kind of distribution, how these costs, how our costs are kind of allocated in terms of where the money is going. Over 50% goes to kind of that direct educational programming, be it regular teaching and learning, either from our teaching staff, special education staff, that includes the student staff, which funds a day a week of our social worker. So those are the direct services provided to kids. Another 15, almost 16% of the budget goes to the Yarmouth tuition, so paying for the education of the middle school and high school students who are attending on the mainland. And then the remainder, 30+% is both for the food service and some of the operational things that help us kind of manage and deliver the school program. As we look a little more closely in the different cost centers in the budget and how that'll be, kind of in the town warrant as it's presented at town meeting, you can start to see some of those significant changes that I spoke about in the summary. So in the first cost center, school debt and contingency, a significant reduction over $80,000, which is the reduced payment as a result of the reduced payment to MSAD 51. This will be our final payment, which is about $27,000. So we'll see further relief as we look ahead to FY27 of that amount. But this is kind of the most significant shift. If you see in the elementary education and transportation cost centers, those are where you see some of the other substantial reductions, again, related to the reduced enrollment at Yarmouth, in Yarmouth High School. We have a big senior class there this year, 6 students who are graduating. So that's part of it, and not as many students following up behind them. So that's what's generating that kind of reduction in the tuition we're sending over, and the kind of ferry costs associated with their transportation. Otherwise, you do see some cost centers with increases. So while those big moves in terms of changes in the budget, also want to, identify those places where we are seeing some increases. So the two cost centers with kind of the greatest increase are special education and then food services. So again, special education, as I mentioned, that is the addition of the ed tech position to support a student who's will be enrolled as a kindergarten, or who will be enrolled next year, and some additional services that we're required to provide. And the food services have gone up, both anticipating the increase in enrollment, so literally feeding more students next year, and what we've seen in terms of the increased costs for the food and supplies in terms of serving kids. The other couple of cost centers in terms of administration, those increases, as I'll speak about momentarily, kind of reflect what some of our salary, kind of summative salary and benefit increases have been. So we see a little bit of increase there, and that's, kind of goes throughout, the expenditure categories. So a few other just kind of notes, I've named kind of the major reductions right in our budget that's generating, the reduction in expenditure, that's contributing to, on the school side, reduced requirement, or reduced need from the local taxpayers. It's the reduced debt service payment, and the reduced tuition and CTC costs for secondary students. As I mentioned, those staffing costs have increased due to just kind of natural salary increases, as well as significant health insurance increases. So our health insurance, we work through kind of a statewide structure through the Maine Education Association in terms of accessing benefits, where we're able to leverage kind of greater rates than we would be able, better rates than we would be able to on our own, but still a significant increase of 9% as it relates to the health insurance for the few of our staff that qualify. I've mentioned the special education costs increase. And then want to call out a few other that, at the high level aren't as clear, but we saw some additional reductions in our facilities and transportation costs. Those three cost centers you see as lower than lower than last year. So on the maintenance side, the rec center is now assumed responsibility for the maintenance and kind of upkeep of the field, the ball field. So that's removed from our budget. In the big picture, right? Additional costs elsewhere, but just on the school side, that's what's reflected there on the facilities. And then in addition, in the transportation cost center, in addition to the reduced CTC ferry costs, we are seeing some reduced costs associated with our the transition of the new bus, to move away from the big yellow bus to the smaller one, and that kind of fleet. So we're seeing some reduced fuel costs, repair kind of maintenance things. We don't have to barge it over as many times as in a year to get it inspected and things like that. So, and then lastly, as I mentioned, our food service costs are a place where we are seeing a little bit of increase due to the additional enrollment, as well as just the increased costs of food. On the revenue side, this is where we see, unfortunately, gains almost kind of across the board in terms of additional non-local revenue that supports our school program. So the first is we're seeing about a $15,000 increase in our state contribution. Shamik Island is what is referred to as kind of a minimum receiver because of our local valuation, right? We don't get much in terms of state subsidy. That $82,000 this coming year reflects the state's contribution to our special education costs. So the state reimburses 50% of our special education costs from 2 years ago. It was a 2-year timeline. So that's what we see in terms of the increase there from increased costs related to special education on the island a couple years ago. Meals reimbursements, so this is now in the state of Maine now for a number of years. All breakfast and lunch are free for all students all year. We have lots of kids eating lunch and breakfast every day. It's wonderful. So we are projecting kind of an increase in terms of our reimbursements, what we're getting from the state in terms of those. So both we're tracking in terms of actuals for this year and then anticipating the increase in enrollment for next year. The school committee recently decided, that was the amendment on May 6th, to include, to budget $8,000 from our projected undesignated fund balance to support, to continue to support as we did this tax year on the revenue side and reduce the burden on taxpayers. Then lastly, these are two new revenue sources that we're able to include this year. So first is, we did receive revenue this year, obviously, from our students, but we didn't know how that was going to go. So it was not included last year as budgeted revenue. But now we have tuition agreements in place, given our experience. And this year, we've budgeted for 8 enrollments. 40,000 reflects 8 enrollments, just to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room. We currently have 9, so we're, at the moment, projected to kind of exceed that target. And then lastly is a federal special education grant. IDEA is the federal special education law that kind of guarantees support and services for students with disabilities. So we get a very small grant, as you can see, $9,000, that's used to offset the teacher's salary, is what that is for. So we have received, Shubi Island School Department has received it for a number of years, but because it's offsetting part of our operating costs, we're including it in the operating budget, because the teacher's salary is included here. So, so that's what's leading to our kind of significant increase on the revenue side. Then just a couple more slides about the kind of state of things. So just wanted to share kind of our most recent balances in terms of our capital reserve accounts. So we have, pretty healthy capital reserves. The school committee was able to make contributions to undesignated fund last year to bolster a number of these reserves. I'll just call out 2 things briefly. One, we certainly in the transition on our transportation fleet, with the bus, the new bus, and needing a new van mid-year, have spent down the transportation reserve. So obviously not very much there. That will be something that we'll prioritize in coming years to kind of replenish so that we're in a position to address our transportation needs when needed. And then we have been doing work for a heat pump project. We have a boiler. The boiler was not replaced in school renovation. So there's been a need, kind of projected need. It's at the end of its life to do something on that front. So we've had a buildings and grounds subcommittee that's been working this year, and we have an application in with Efficiency Maine for a potential project that would require some of the use of our capital reserve. So that's pending, but not finalized at this point. And then the last thing I wanted to mention as it relates to the school department budget is something called the Rural Education Achievement Program grant, our REAP grant is how it's referred to. So this is a grant that Shubi Island School has written for a number of years. So it's a federal grant that we apply for annually. The purpose of this grant is to supplement our instructional program. So it's not to supplant, kind of take the place of some of the the expenses in our operating budget, but to add to the program we're offering to students. So we have been anxious about whether this was going to be available to us this year with all the potential changes at the federal level around education funding. But I did receive today my invitation to our grant application. So we are excited that we're eligible for almost $26,000 in this coming fiscal year. These funds have been used historically to fund a lot of the field trips. Our group is off island now in our partnership with Island Institute for a 3-day field trip with all of the other kind of outer island school communities together. We've bought supplemental instructional and curriculum materials to be able to support our program, technology purchases, and professional development for staff. So those are some of the ways that we've been able to utilize that to enhance the program that we offer at Shubi Island School. And with that, I'll close.
Thanks, Aaron.
Turn it back to you, Bob.
Yep. All right, so capital guys, why don't you guys come on up to the table here as well? There are capital fellows. Yes, all questions for the end, thank you. Yep.
You mean the finance committee?
I'm sorry. I always want to say capital. Yeah. For the finance committee. They are capital fellows, but yes. Herb, were you part of that effort or just ex officio?
Ex officio.
Ghost member. So again, for those of you who don't know, I think everybody here does know, but the Finance Committee started up this year for the first time in a long time and has done just a remarkable job helping the Select Board better understand some of the longer term implications of where we are, in particular with capital planning, but going into more detail with capital planning, getting further down into the asset value categories, into things that we don't always pay as much attention to as we do big things like the stone pier. Carol, you have something to say?
Well, I just was wondering what the format is. Are you gonna have questions
Yep.
for everybody at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right, hit it.
That's it. We can do it.
We're
All
done.
right, done. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Oh, wait, oh, no. I can't do that. We're not there yet. Okay. And we should just say that we designed it not knowing exactly what it would be for because it was in the middle of the budget project, but we kind of see this as throwing up a lot of information, some of the process that we used to get where we got, and where we think we can go. And welcome anyone, any questions rather than getting into the weeds about certain things tonight, you know, to be in touch with us or something if you have a particular question. But also to just explain this system, because it was new to me as well. We have the luxury of focused time. We were focusing just on this. And you can rest assured that all these people here were knocking themselves out to do all that stuff during the budget. As I looked under the hood and how the budget gets, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So I'll read through these slides quickly. Jay's the color man. If he has anything to add at the end of the slide, we'll do that. The committee members, John Rent was the chair, Jay Corson, Jim Hartling, and Chip Emery commenced January 2025, and we took about this, we were working for about 13 weeks. And this was towards specifically the 2026 budget, and to begin the process of updating and creating a capital plan. People ask, what's a capital plan? I didn't really know what it was. Capital is money or other assets. It's also to maintain an inventory of capital property, which you own, prioritize and evaluate new capital projects, purchases, such as a new ambulance or a new stone pier, develop funding models for these capital purchases, and to either use primarily reserve funds or bonds. And also decide, there's been some new thinking along whether to contract it out to an outside vendor or do it in-house. We used an online workshop, Basecamp. One of the things I gleaned from former members of finance committees or efforts was that sometimes the work is not available for future generations or what somebody did. This is a system, an online system that I've used for a number of years. There's 3 million users worldwide. It's online, it's collaborative, and people can work on it at their. It handles tasks, docs and files, schedule, and also I think what saves us a lot is project activity, which is something you won't find in a typical email account. But it sequentially lists everything that happened in the workshop day by day. It is secure, invite only. It has a calendar, and it will update to your phone and your desktop calendar. And what's nice about this is if you had to onboard a new member, now you would send them a flurry of unrelated emails. Somebody can slide into a seat in this and go to work and see what happened. This is, that's actually all the items that we have. Each one of those is a topic. To each of those topics is related an email. When we fire off an email, it gets posted in that topic sequentially. And so somebody that was joining, maybe joining the finance committee, a show of hands, could jump right in. this is 75 discussions about 75 different topics, and it does record all the emails and documents for future committees. What are assets, existing assets? Assets are, call them hard, something you have to replace, like the ambulance. Soft, something you have to maintain, it might be a road.
This is, yeah, basically what we did was we went through a number of the various parts of the town government and looked at things like the fire and rescue folks, public works, and tried to actually understand what assets the town owns and what they don't, and what they've got left. And we think we found a lot of it, not necessarily all of it. And we tried to break them down into two groups, as Chip has put up here. It's things that we have to replace, pickup trucks, fire engines, ambulances. And then the other grouping was things we have to maintain, like roads, school buildings, town offices, and so forth. And once you can break these lists up, you can now start to plan for how you're going to pay for them and finance them. So our first step here was to create lists, and at some point, Chip is in this presentation, Chip is going to show you a slide with hundreds of items on it that we've looked at, and we haven't found it all, but we're working on it.
And I should say, part of what we're looking at is the process with which the town works and does this. And they're doing their best. We tried to coalesce and get together the information so it would work with itself. But the town over the time, startup as their own town, and processes were developed to handle things. And we're trying to look at improving the process so that the reserve accounts are actually connected to the account. How do you fund these assets? A reserve account. What's a reserve account? I didn't know what it was. Kind of a savings account for each asset group. It could be all the floats. They're a group. And then the other method is bonding, which is generally large or bond borrowing.
So part of the follow-on process to finding out what the assets we own consist of was how are we going to keep them going. Some of them, for instance, we have assets that are going to be coming up that we sort of own now, like the stone pier, we own it, but it needs a little attention. Roads need a little attention. Different kind of attention. So what we've done is to go back to that hard and soft concept. Bonding versus savings falls into the same kind of category as trying to figure out what we have and what's the best way to finance it, and how can we learn how to provide the financing for all of this. I just realized I'm repeating myself a little bit, forgive me. So, that's where we left off. Bonding is a number you're gonna hear a lot of tonight. Every $1 million is gonna cost you roughly $70,000 a year in debt service. And that's a generalized number that's based on 5%, 25 years, and $1 million. So, for instance, if you wanted to spend $7 million on the stone pier, that's $500,000 in debt service. You want to add to that a couple of fire trucks, whatever. There's a whole list that we'll get to later of things that we can add in. And so what we're trying to do is figure out where we bond, where we set aside reserves, what are the timelines? There are certain things where the timelines are too short to set the money aside. If we want to buy a fire truck in 25 years, we can set that money aside annually. If we want to buy a fire truck for $500,000 tomorrow, not likely, it's gonna come out of bonding or some other form of finance. So these are the things that we were trying to work through as to how to create a rational process by which we divided the type of items, what we actually needed, what we have, what we needed, which we didn't have, and how we could finance it. So that's sort of how we got to this.
So we created a master asset list. Two of the documents Vika had given us, to reserve accounts. We did it online so we could all work online at our leisure. We estimated on that the replacement date and cost. We were given certain information by the auditors, which is probably only depreciation schedule, not necessarily accurate. That's all we had. The annual maintenance cost, and through that, we tried to come up with the annual reserve funds needed. This is what it looks like online. On the right is largely figuring out what those assets cost. On the left, they're listed. And so we take the replacement cost and estimated in depreciation, and we factor in the reserve account, the ROI and reserve accounts, which is 3.5%. And then what inflation is, this has a live inflation. It all goes to one cell, so you can change inflation and look at, if you change the inflation rate, the whole sheet changes. So you can do a little bit of a what if it's 3%, what if it's 5%, what if, and the town assets, there's 130, and there's more now, that are not including the school. Things like the transfer station, floats, buildings, vehicles, fire rescue, and roads. Key among them is that 60 plus of these, half of the town's assets are very small. So they take a lot of work. Might take as much work as a big one to manage that. Somebody's got to do it. This is a sheet of those, and they're valuable. And you'll see the ones, Cousin Island, Brown Road, Stone Pier, all those. If you'll notice that a quarter of that circle is very small slices of pie. And these are some of the ones that Jay and John went on the road and spoke to people. And again, it's nothing, nobody's missing anything intentionally, but there are within the town there are people who do different jobs, and they talk about different things, and they may expect different things in their expectations. And they may not always report that back to Vika. So this is, again, part of the process that should be fixed. Public Works, these are just, for instance, things that came up in conversation: mower for a school field, roller for gravel roads, a new truck in the town building, needs a roof, needs furnace, needs septic, town garage. Waste oil furnace needs to be redone. The salt shed is under repair, is damaged, and the insurance company won't cover it for the full amount. And it needs a hot water heater. So these things that haven't been decided, but it's just an example of an improvement we think that can come in the process. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one of the things that we need to do is, that conversation has to occur every year. Not once every time we decide to appoint a finance committee or some other committee to take a look at these things. That's a conversation that needs to go on every year. And this is not to throw another burden on an already overworked office, but it is, so that we know where we stand with things. We need to have those conversations, and we probably need some outside professional information as to what's the truck worth, what's a fire truck worth.
Yeah.
Where are we going with, what's it gonna cost to replace some of this stuff? We have some numbers, but some of these are guesses and estimations and so forth. And I'm gonna jump ahead on you a little bit, but you're about to talk about roads.
Yeah.
Where we've got an excellent program. Herb, thank you very much. Oh, do I have to mention Dyer too? All right, so he was involved too. Anyway, sorry. But the point is that this is a maintenance one. If you look at the roads as you drive around town now, we haven't done the annual maintenance run for, I'm gonna say 2 to 3 years, roughly. I'm not sure about that. But part of the program that was designed by the road committee and has been forwarded by the road committee is that if you maintain them, then you stay on the program and the roads are in good shape. As soon as you start to let things slide a little bit, the cost of fixing them and bringing them back up to whatever standard exactly we're looking for is gonna cost a whole lot more than an ongoing maintenance program.
This 840,000 was something that was given to her by the paving company as a 10-year cycle maintenance for all the roads, 10 miles, I think, of roads on that. That means the reserve fund has to set aside $80,000 a year. And since we became a town, the work on roads was accomplished through planning and funding the road reserve. They are our most expensive asset, and these, I mean, you know, these numbers could be off a little bit, but the point they're trying to make is that it's one of those things you don't think about. Original cost was $2.6 million. What Jay was talking about was on the road maintenance. This is a chart that the road committee uses, and it's I think it came from the paving people, and it shows what Jay talks about is that there's a curve that gets very expensive, and you try and keep your roads within those areas, those white areas, to keep them good, so that it's a lot cheaper to there is a plan, a very good plan, but first, and this is for her, we have to talk about drainage. So that's
Is that one of your favorite topics?
but that's an example of it. It's very difficult getting drainage like for out here figured out. It has nothing, you know, with the money. It just takes a lot. Significant new projects. These are in $1 million. They're not designed to be scary, but you know, everything is in million. There's high-low estimates here. These two bars are going to be high and low estimates for these items. Stone Pier, 4 and 6, Wharf Road, barging, barging, Cousins Wharf, Cousins Island parking, South Shore Drive, roads we didn't put in on the transfer station. Sorry, Jim, we can put something in there if you want. Fire department and the public safety building. There's a lot going on there, as Jay said, that can quickly turn into a lot.
If you just, let's just take the Stone Wharf, high estimate, 6 million, Wharf Road, 4 million, that's 10. And Cousins Wharf, because you gotta land somewhere on the other side, it's always a good option when you're on the ferry. That's $16 million. Times 7, math in the head, anybody? That's a huge tax increase. That's $70,000 per million. So the questions that come up are priorities and how we decide where we're gonna spend the money, over what time frame we're gonna do it, and how much we're gonna do. You know, and these are all big decisions that have to be made by the town.
There's been some excellent work done on grants. There are, certainly can't go into this in detail, but the good news is there's some grants out there that these are ones that largely I think Carol has worked on and have come through, and they're, you know, some significant dollars. So that's an area where finding grants or people that know how to find grants are very valuable to the town. To do things like that, and there will be possibility of grants for all those great big bars that you just saw. So it's a key area, but I don't think it's always looked at. It's not overlooked, but it's it's very important. So there's some good news here, and this is bond debt expiring. That's a stacked chart of all the $600,000 in 2024, and you can see, thankfully, this number goes down. Cumberland, that Aaron talked about, NSAD is expiring. Cumberland's
That's
get out of jail card.
get out of jail card.
Yeah. That's going away. Take it away.
So by 2028, we are at roughly more than a 50% reduction in what we've been paying for debt service. So before we get too excited and decide to spend a whole lot of money, the difference is just using round numbers between 150 and 450,000, $300,000. Again, divided by my favorite number, 70, allows us some room to bond, but not enough to do any of those projects that were on the previous chart. So, again, it's gonna be a question of creating a priority list and deciding what time frame we wanna do things in and can do things in, and working out, balancing things between bonding and setting aside reserves. Reserves earn us roughly 3.5% a year. That's nice. Bonds, figuring cost us roughly 5% a year. That's the downside. So somewhere in there, there's a balance, and it's gonna take some time, and it's time that you can only spend once you know what the targets are. And I think I sound like I'm harping on creating the targets, but unless we do that, we're just flailing around in the dark.
The school upgrade, of course, is going to carry through for quite a long way. And Jay, you can make the broadband.
Well, broadband, we've kept the broadband debt there. The original plan was that the Axiom would be paying the debt, our cost of debt, but the debt is in our name. You know, our name's not on it, or is on it rather, Axiom is not. So our approach has been that we include it in the debt, and if we get money from Axiom, that'll be a revenue to the town. But given our name on the debt, it's gotta be there.
So future capacity improves. Here's, now this is something that John Brent has done a great job of coming up with model for bonding. So capital budget projections. And I welcome any of you to talk to him directly about it. I can only go through it quickly, but to show you, it speaks what Jay was just saying to future, you want to know, okay, how much can we afford? And it's you know, it's more complicated than it looks or it sounds. So here's for inflation-only growth. The budget rises annually with inflation. Capital funds grow proportionally. 10-year bonding capacity is $11 million. If you added 1% and you for growth, that's 1% annually of the budget on top of inflation, a year, so on and so forth, compounding over time. It adds $3 million in capital over 10 years, or the 10-year bonding capacity goes to $15 million. So it shows you the importance of even a small number of 1%, how important that can be and how much it needs to get looked at. These are existing, these are a couple of things of actual items. I said 4 is actually 3, I just want to. This is to say what's the replacement cost. And again, all of our numbers, we only had, the auditor said, okay, this truck is depreciated straight line over 20 years, so that assumes that it needs to be replaced in 20 years. None of us are ready, willing, or able to go through every town asset and decide when's the expiration date on it. But we use that, say a tank truck, $500,000 in a fairly short period of time, 2027, you'd have to bond Freightliner, which is a 2015 Freightliner, which in its 2038 would be purchased for $583. You could save technically $44,000 a year, and we'll get to why you might want to do that in a second. And there's another one that's in 2043. You can see how the cost of replacement goes up enormously.
I think the, just one little side point on all this. Every vehicle we own is way more than the 20 and 25-year lives that we've projected. You don't want to know how old some of the fire equipment is. Which brought us to, brings us to the interesting question. If you need something, for instance, the tank truck by 2027, you can't put that money aside. Or you're unlikely to be able to put aside over the next 2 years, $500,000. So most likely that's gonna fall into the bond group. Looking at the other ones with the much longer lives, there you could start to think about, you could reserve that money. And that's money that you'd be earning, just using today's numbers, 3.5%. So better than nothing. So these are, again, all questions that can be resolved, thought through, and figured out once there's a plan, once there's a course of action in sight.
Just an example of say a new asset, a new fire truck in 2043. The cost estimate in 2024 was $335,000, inflation is 4%. 2043, cost estimate is $678. Savings yield 3.5%, bond interest 5%, bond term 25 years. And ChatGPT was very, very helpful with this. I was actually amazed at how it took me way, way back. But all of these the point of these slides is that all of these variables are estimates and must be considered within each analysis. And also, these are over a very long period of time, so a little bit can make a big difference because if you're looking over 10, 15, 20 year period of time. So it does take a lot of analysis to look at it. If we were going to bond this, and you would consider this is $386,000 in today's dollars, that's the principal kind of that you'd be paying on that bond. The inflation or interest would be $818,000. If you saved for that, and we did this because there's some conception that, oh, it's always more expensive to bond, or it's always more expensive. But what you have to look at when you do an analysis on numbers with future payments is you have to look at them in present value terms. You might be paying $20,000 out for 20 years, but you're buying it with cheaper dollars. It doesn't cost you. So you have to say, what's that? You have to make the analysis based on bringing it all back to today's, using these factors. So technically that's a little bit less. That's the actual savings between the two methods. And that would be the inflation value of that. So you compare these two things and you get a savings in today's dollars. Now, depending on the variables, either one of these could win. If one of those went up to 4% and the other one came down to 3%, whatever, hands up. So the point is that you have to do these analyses. There's another method of analysis which somebody offered to me, was that you always bond because then your kids pay it off. And you don't have to use your money to save up. So there's a lot of different ways. Well, can't argue with them. Undesignated funds, the great, I'm gonna go through this quickly and then hand it over to you. And leftover money from a previous year, it's kind of a rainy day fund. The state dictates what's the min and max amount, and the town has to vote on where to spend them if they're undesignated funds.
Okay, undesignated funds, the big elephant in the room. The source of undesignated funds basically is, very simply, if last year you budgeted $4.2 million for your town expenditures, and you only spent $4 million, there's $200,000 floating out there. The 200 goes into the undesignated fund balance account. And over the years, that can build up to a significant amount of money. In some ways, it's bad budgeting, because you shouldn't have that necessarily have, let me rephrase that. You might not necessarily have that much money left over at the end of each year. We as a town decided that we would stick, I think it's between 16 and 25%. I haven't looked at the ordinance in quite a while, of the tax, how much the revenue is, where the expenditures are. And that the designated fund account had to stay within that range. So for the last couple of years, for instance, the town has found itself in a position where there was a lot more money in that fund. And for the last couple of years, it's used $200,000 to $250,000 to offset the expenses to keep from raising taxes. The question is you're never totally sure exactly what that number is going to look like. And what you really need to know as you're planning is roughly what that number is going to look like a lot sooner than we seem to be able to do it. I know that this year has been a particularly difficult year to get a handle on that number. And so, that's something that we, one way or another, need to work on, which will allow for better planning. So that's basically undesignated funds.
Inflation versus taxes, this was the, based on the information from the tax assessor, and Jim Hartling, who has a real background in municipal planning, says most people tie it to the CPI index, so he got us some numbers and took our best. These are cumulative, so rather than showing that taxes went up 3% this year and 4% next year, it's compounded to show at the end of that period of time what the actual increase was, the compounded actual accumulated increase was. And that's what these numbers are. It's a cumulative rate. And this is the consumer price index. And those numbers are, so it's up 31% those years, 32% for the year. Now, due to, and
We should ask if they have a guess as to where our taxes are.
yeah, that's right. Does anybody want to guess? Well, you should.
Above or below that 31.9?
You should know that to have good conservative fiscal management.
That's a lot
Should I
of
press the button?
Yeah, press the
All right, here we go.
Whoa.
Where she stops? 23. So you can see that consistently, year over year, it stayed below. And it's actually 8% below over those years of CPI. So, conservative fiscal management. Going forward, where can the committee add value? There's no bullet points on this slide because we don't know. Expanded bandwidth for capital and fiscal planning, help develop process for capital and fiscal management, active participation in the annual budget process. And as we've watched it this year, I think we can, and it's a lot easier to look at stuff from the outside and see what's going on than when they're in the thick of it making it happen. So we have some thoughts about how it might make their job easier. You need all the information. information. Record and preserve institutional memory. Again, back to all the work that people do. It's like when people do all this work on the Board of Selectmen or anything. When they're gone, they're gone. Their historical knowledge is gone, and it's never captured. And there's no way for the next person to slide in and pick up on that. So that's what we have with the financial. Long after we're gone, there will be 71 topics for somebody else to take a look at. But that's part of what we think, and help educate. That can help educate new select board members. They're welcome to go into that base camp and look at all those emails, and if they want to. Revaluation is being considered for the town, and it's still in the state of working on it, and it has, I don't know, but that's one thing that will be looked at in the future.
You just let that one, we talked earlier about it, but
Yeah,
rather than going into what revaluation means and what the possible effects are on everything, it's something that will have to happen. Basically, the state requires that you do a revaluation when the assessed value of the property in the community falls below the market value by, I think it's 30%. Again, it's been a while. So it's something that state will require us to do if we don't do it ourselves. And I think the assessor has been slowly working at bringing things up where they can. If I have that right, that's just off the.
We're a couple years away from having a town-wide reevaluation.
So, some people will go up, some people will go down. What really happens is the whole pie grows. And so your percentage of that pie may change a little bit, or it may not. And so, it's just relative to the value of your real estate relative to the total value of real estate on the island.
your house has gone up a whole lot in the last 10 years, but so has everyone else's. So it's not as though, it's just a way of kind of leveling the playing field again, and as Jay said, it's required. And circuit breaker, which is something that Carol has done some work on, and just so you know, maybe you know, circuit breakers are kind of a safety net for people who are challenged to pay their taxes. And there's various ways they can set aside, get offset, or whatever, and that is an effort that needs to be looked at. For that reason, and also professional help for building services evaluation, to all the different things. It's just not, we're certainly not qualified to do that.
We don't know what a new roof is worth, or septic.
Or when you need it, how long you need it. One of the very important questions for all these things is how long is it? Time value of replacement for these is one of the most significant factors. And right now, we need to have a better idea on that. Huge capital needs. Many of our existing capital assets are priorities: roads, public safety equipment, public works equipment. We basically came away thinking we should aggressively it just means pay a lot of attention to adding to the reserve funds annually. We found that it didn't look like there was enough being set aside for things if you want to own these and if you want them to be of service to you. And again, it's nobody's situation. You concentrate on what needs to get done and all the healthcare and stuff that Vic has to look at. Nobody's thinking about the truck or some old grader or something like that, or the salt shed. So it's a matter of Jay's point about resources, of having enough people to do that stuff. I know the big capital projects that will require bonding makes it easier to choose the best option, saving for bonding. Ambulance in the future, fire trucks coming up, 2038, 2043, and fire trucks are a big ticket item with a lot of multi-year.
Yeah, well, we just bought an ambulance 2-3 years ago. We really need to be starting to set aside money now in the reserve accounts for the next one. And roughly 20 or 25 years from now. But if we do it in the reserve funds, it's fairly painless at this point. But that money will build, and you add in a 3.5% payout from the bank for the money. That can start to make a lot of changes. But again, we're back into some items we can do that with, some items that we need now, we can't do that with, particularly big ticket items. So, we're back into sort of, there's a theme that's been running through all of this. And I don't like to beat the cheval morts, as they like to say. But we need to get the goals, get the targets. Working out the financing is not a challenge. It's not that big a deal to do. But the decisions as to the targets are difficult ones. But they're the ones that have to be made so you know what you're aiming for. And once that occurs, then a lot of it becomes a lot simpler and easier.
So we can do this, and I, just in a closing thought, again, it was to, as you say, a theme that comes, is there's a lot of stuff that needs to be taken care of, and there's a lot, we need a lot of people. And I obviously hope that there'd be more people here, because I would ask them to help. I personally have done, a fair amount of work for nonprofits, and they make this a nice place to live. The town makes this possible. So not to take anything away from effort, everybody's dying for volunteers, I understand it. But if there are people available, there have to be people with certain skill sets that can help with certain things, even just temporarily, not join a committee, but just have a finite job. If you know people who are willing to do that type of thing, who have an expertise that we don't, and are willing to say, okay, I'm gonna put 10 hours into this, dig in. I thought of a little phrase, I don't maybe like it. Ask not what your island can do for you. Ask what you can do for your island. Have you heard that before? Oh my God, I made it up. Anyway, that was the other takeaway. There's all kinds of things that can be done, which don't mean joining a committee or doing it. It could be a finite task of helping we could do something. And that's it. Mic drop.
All right, thanks guys. All right, the next presentation will be a little bit shorter than that.
Do you need us to hang around?
For questions, please, if you would.
We've got join with the section program.
Yeah.
Just show that on the screen.
If you, hold on.
So our fire truck.
What?
Look, there's a fire truck.
Yeah.
Fire truck. And huge truck.
Oh, accessory to connect, yes.
Are you in mirror mode?
Yeah.
This is the one you used?
No, but he didn't have it closed, like you made me close.
Oh, is the,
So.
oh, yeah.
He messed it up.
Yeah, we're finding out that it's, to do this, when you hot swap, it's better to have it asleep. Otherwise,
Nap time?
That's my
do
mom.
that.
Tap dance.
All the two slides.
4. Three.
It's two.
It's nice to see you all awake. This is very, we need to stand up. We got
So I can start talking, even without the slides. Take my paper copy, in case something wasn't working.
You want to copy of this?
fiscal year 2026, the proposed budget is up by 5.8%, by 4.5%. This is the town budget, so this is not the school, but it does include capital, obviously, which
It
is a big
includes
part
the
of what these guys are talking about.
Mika said nothing.
It includes, so the 4.5%
Okay, it does include the
increase is
school, yeah.
everything inclusive.
And the revenue is up 5.8% in the new budget. And that includes everything from fees to undesignated fund transfer, which you heard mentioned earlier. And we had to take a conservative approach on that because we didn't have all the numbers that we would like to have at this point in the process. But it provides the opportunity at our interim town meeting that will likely happen late summer, early fall, for some ordinance change issues that are to some degree required by the state. By then we'll know more concretely what the undesignated fund balance is. And we could, for example, decide at that town meeting to have a warrant article to increase the capital reserves more than we're doing, more than the recommended increase that will be happening, be presented at town meeting in June. Chip, tell me when I should open it up. So the debt service is at 455. I think you saw that on some earlier slides. It's down from what it was a couple of years ago, and it's continuing to go down as some of these old bonds from secession and the new school department begin to roll off, as well as some other bonds rolling off. And the capital budget is $722,000 for this year, according to this slide, which I can see, but you can't. And we'll wait now until, can I open it up?
No, we gotta wait for the, if maybe unplug it, but, the projector's gonna reset.
Zika, are those slides up there, are there more copies?
Yeah, so there's copies of everything on here, included the two.
Does everybody have a copy of the slide that has the bar charts on it? 4 bar charts for 2023 actual, 2024 actual, 2025 budget, and 2026 budget?
I can't.
Okay, so we're going to pretend we're looking up there, you can look at your paper. You'll notice the green chunk of each bar that is the largest chunk by far. That's capital improvements, and you can see.
It's in black and white.
We have black and white.
Color done.
You are special then.
Is that black and white too?
They all are.
Okay. So pretend you can see the colors and I'll do puppets. Capital improvement budget is up by 40%. Comparing the 2026 proposed budget to the 2025 budget. We've all talked at large debate and conversation about why we're increasing the capital budget so much. A lot of it has to do with the aging infrastructure that is further challenged by, frankly, climate change. Stone Pier, the places where the roads are getting threatened, in addition to some just aging infrastructure. Administration and select board budgets, those departments are up by 7%. Benefits and insurance is up by 30%. That's partially because of increased rates from the insurance carriers, and just as the school leverages the state of Maine's educational insurance program, the town leverages insurance purchasing through the Maine Municipal Association. Some of that increase of 30% is due to rate increases, and some of it's due to employees. As we've had employee changeover, some people choose to take the insurance benefits, some people choose to not take the insurance benefit and take that money in other forms. So as we've changed employees, most recently, more of them are choosing to take the insurance, which drives that up. Contributions up 12%, fire and rescue up 8%, public services up 17%, law enforcement up 26%. A big part of that is the residential cost, I believe. Does that mean it's reset now?
Could be, yeah, so, I hope so.
Plug it in.
Yeah, so we're gonna try.
Board's question now.
And
That's good.
Yeah, we good.
Alright. This is the slide I've been talking about. So just look at the green portion of each bar and you can see how from 2023 actual to 2024 actual, it actually went down a bit. And then in 2025, the budget amount went up quite a bit and it's gone up quite a bit more, it's up by 40% in our proposed budget that we'll be voting on at town meeting. So you can see the relative changes, a lot of the colors as you go across from 2023 through 2026, a lot of the colors remain relatively constant in the size of their portion of the bar, and some of them go up quite a bit, but the largest is capital, and frankly, I'm not sure if I speak for the entire board, but I know we've had a lot of conversation about how we wish we could put more into capital, more of an increase in the capital budget for this year. The challenge that the select board deals with every year is figuring out what has to be spent, figuring out what should be spent, and a lot of the capital falls into that should be spent, versus keeping tax increase to a minimum. And as you saw from the Finance Committee presentation, our tax increases have not kept up with inflation. That's good news. We've tried to keep them down at reasonable numbers. And we might have put more into capital for this recommended budget had we had more solid information about the undesignated fund transfer. I do want to make one additional comment about the undesignated fund balance. I believe Chip or Jay pointed out that that comes from if you budgeted $1 million last year, but you only spent $800,000, and you have $200,000 in the undesignated fund balance. That's one way that it happens. The other way is if you budgeted $100,000 revenue and you wound up with $150,000 revenue, then that adds $50,000 to the undesignated fund balance as well. So it can be added. The undesignated fund balance can be increased by money that you budget that you don't spend, or money that you budget that you receive more than you budgeted on the income side. So the next slide, these are that's just a graph of what we've been talking about with the capital reserve accounts. And there are different reasons, some of which were talked about by the Finance Committee. One that wasn't discussed, as you go after some of these larger projects, and I'll just use the stone pier because that's been the one that's had so much work this past year. If you go after congressionally directed spending money, you have to have matching money when it comes time to spend, but you also have to be able to show when you're applying. To some degree, they're making you show how serious you are by asking what money you've already put aside for those projects. And the fact that we've got almost $1 million in the Stone Pier Reserve, I think it's just under $1 million in the Stone Pier Reserve. When we applied to Collins' office and Pingree's office for CDS money, that dramatically increases the chance that it will be awarded. As most of you know, we were put in the bill for this past fiscal year at the federal level, both by Collins and Pingree, and then those proposed bill CDS items never made it to a budget because of how the budget procedure went in Washington this year. So we just finished recently reapplying for CDS money, again for the Stone Pier, and Pingree's office was fairly encouraging. Collins' office was much less encouraging this year than they were last year. A lot of politics involved and all that, but bottom line, one of the reasons, in addition to all the reasons the Finance Committee discussed, that you need to have reserve money out there is when you go out to apply for grants or CDS money, congressionally directed spending money, you need to show that you've got skin in the game out front. You need to show that the taxpayers have voted to support funding in such fashion that it demonstrates not just the select board support for the project, but also townwide support for the project. These are some of the large projects, in addition to all the things, they were also mentioned by the Finance Committee. Stone Wharf, widening the road, paving the road, raising the road, adding more parking in a couple of different ways. It's just taken way too long to get that project done, and we're really trying to break that log jam and get it moving. Barging, everybody knows about the challenges down at Bennett's, and we're getting hopefully close to a finished report from the engineer as to whether improvements could be made at Bennett's, whether they could be permitted. That study, by definition, has to include a look at alternatives, and that's been done as well. Storm-related erosion at South Shore Drive and East Shore Drive, as well as Jenks and at the Hook. There's money from FEMA that's been awarded to us. We've received some of it, in particular for South Shore Drive, East Shore Drive, and the Stones here. We haven't received all of it. We hope, we think, I've been promised that we will receive all of it, but everybody knows what's going on in Washington these days. And those are short-term repairs. Those are not aimed at resilient improvements to those infrastructure pieces that would allow them to survive future storms like the ones we had in the winter of 2024. And then lastly, continuing the good work that's been done on taking care of the town infrastructure, in particular the roads. Because of COVID and a few other factors, we've kind of taken a hiatus from the annual maintenance, but the highly esteemed road committee is working hard to get that booted up and going again. There's also a few technical issues that need to be taken care of, some survey kind of things in terms of drain replacements, in which you want the drain replacements done before you do the paving, so you don't tear up the new paving by going back in a year later and doing drain replacements. So hopefully those survey questions and title questions are coming to an end. And that is the end of the presentation. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and comments. I would ask that you raise your hand, and if you want to talk, please come and stand on the screen X so that everybody can see you. If you'd like to share, we can do that as well. And if you can try to direct it to either the Finance Committee or the School Committee or the Select Board, the Town Administrator, that would help as well. I'll try to moderate. Yes, please.
Can I add just a couple other things that I think would be worth mentioning that will happen in fiscal year 20? So, for I think the general public, sometimes it's hard to see any work that's being done or any improvement that has or hasn't been made. But in the fiscal year 26 proposed budget, some of the added costs in there, the town will be receiving an Island Institute intern for 2 years. So that is a full-time position for 2 years that the town has. It's a small cost, $15,000 that's been added to the town budget. But it's a service that we will receive from them. The intern will be focusing on updating, most likely making it a bit shorter, the town's comprehensive plan. So by the time the intern is done, we will have hopefully a new comprehensive plan, as well as taking the assessment of all of the town access to the shore and providing a better informative document or whatever you would call it to have that available to the general public as well as to the town employees. This year, going into fiscal year 26, one of the bigger change when it comes to infrastructure maintenance is the Selectboard is proposing to outsource, which was this year, it was trialed, and the floats are all in, and if you notice, there's 4 new ones. Coastal Waters worked really hard to make that happen, but that is a cost that is now added into the budget for Public Works. So instead of having the Public Works employees do it, there will be a hired contractor. So there are some small added costs that have been added that will hopefully receive more benefit from them than the small costs that incorporated in it. So those are just a couple things that I thought were worth mentioning that the public might not be aware of.
And I would add, relative to the, I'll use the floats as an example. We looked hard at whether to continue having employees do that work versus outsourcing it. The piece of equipment that's key to that operation is the boom truck that Cumberland so nicely gave us as a parting gift. It really was a nice gift. Bill Shane made it happen, but that boom truck was very, very old when they gave it to us, and that was many years ago that they gave it to us. That boom truck was no longer safe to use. So we could have bought a new boom truck, we could have leased a boom truck, or we could try outsourcing, which is what a lot of towns do to manage the physical aspect of moving those docks around. And that's what we're trying this year. But there was cost analysis done on that to consider all those options. So again, questions? Anybody? Comments? Herb?
Hasn't been there.
Empty chair.
Did you hear all those cracks?
Yeah.
This is for the school committee. I'm very interested in the tuition program. I'm going to new. Two numbers stuck out. The total cost per student is $35,000. If I did the math right, 40,000 divided by 8 is $5,000 for tuition. Just talk about that difference and what the vision is in the future for that program, what you hope.
First, just in terms of the total cost that's calculated on that slide, that's inclusive of all costs, including what historically had been the debt service costs, as well as the tuition costs that go to Yarmouth. So the 35,000 is essentially the full school budget, right, divided by the by the enrollment. So that's, I think, above and beyond the actual cost of providing service to the individual kids, right? And that analysis, that's how the state calculates them. So, so just a little bit of context of that number. There was work, and I'll say briefly, and then anybody can add in from school committee. That the enrollment and kind of mainland student enrollment program is designed around sustainability ultimately in terms of having like sustainable enrollment for the school. So the primary kind of goal has not been from a revenue perspective. And so in doing some analysis around potential options and how to kind of position ourselves, because it's relatively unique in terms of the opportunity for families to come and pay tuition. We were trying to find something that was generally affordable for families, but was able to contribute to defray some of the costs. So 5,000 was the figure that was done in the past year. We had just a small pilot this year, and so continued with that figure going into next year as we see how that impacts demand and so forth moving forward in future years. So I don't know if you guys have.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick on that too, that the expense for the school budget for Big Island School is what it is right now, no matter kind of how many kids are in there, up to a certain point. So we're within the range of, we didn't have to add any expense for taking on new students. So it's, there's no additional expense. The food service would be the one thing, but that's kind of offset by state revenue anyway, or meals reimbursement anyway. But like Aaron said, I'm just gonna kind of repeat it, the goal for us was to enhance the social aspect of being on the island school with the decrease in enrollment we've seen. And the students we've been able to bring in have like kind of filled in places where there may be one student in a certain grade. Out here, we've been able to bring in another one, and we've been able to be really picky, I guess, for lack of a better word, about which grades we bring in. So it's really been a win for the school in terms of an increased revenue stream that we've never had before. That's a win for the island resident students because now they have more social interactions with kids their age. And it's a win for the families of the mainland students because they're able to get essentially private school education for $5,000 a year. So it's great situation for all of us, and hope to hope to continue that program.
Thanks, Jeff, for that.
Thanks, Barry. Any other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am?
I was just going to ask,
Can you come up? Thank you.
this is for the school board as well. I would like to know, we haven't had sixth graders for years now. Why do we have a sixth grade this year?
Hopefully coming last time. I think it was, in individual years, kind of based on the students, the student needs, the program, the enrollment capacity that we did have in that upper grades classroom, to be able to maintain them in that space, and kind of their particular academic needs, in conversation with the families, I felt like that was the best kind of agreement for this year. So it was kind of on a one-year basis, based on those kind of unique set of circumstances.
So if we have fifth graders coming next year, the year afterwards, are you still considering keeping sixth grade here?
That'll be something we evaluate at that time. I mean, there is some conversation within the school community about middle school programming that we're engaged in with our parents and families right now. So that's a conversation that's happening for now, but the sixth grade decision was just kind of a one-off decision based on the particular circumstances of the student, the enrollment this year, that made the most sense for that student in our.
Does that mean we're going to pay for another teacher for the sixth grade students?
No, again, that was part of the enrollment configuration this year, so no, it was not an additional staffing associated with that.
Just tell them how many fifth graders we have, maintenance.
I saw 0.
Okay, so that's the class size is appropriate.
That's why I asked about.
Okay, so we should all be standing up here so that everybody on YouTube can also hear. Any more on that? Okay, other questions? Thoughts, comments?
I have a question, Bob.
Just
Taking my school committee hat off here, sit back there for a second, but, so I never heard the final number from the municipal side. What was the total increase on the municipal side? Not including
dollars or the taxpayer increase or?
I guess our percentage increase on it.
The percentage increase in the average tax bill will be 4.5%.
Yeah, okay, so I guess that's not quite what I'm asking.
Okay.
What I'm asking is on the municipal side, take out everything school related, what was the increase in expense?
Do you have that, Andy?
I did, but I don't know that I have that piece of paper. Hold that thought.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll come back to that question while she's looking for it. Anybody else, any other questions, comments? Bert? Great.
Oh, that's not.
This is for the finance committee. You guys are implying that some decisions need to be made, priorities need to be set. Who do you see setting those? Is that finance committee job? Is that a selectman's job? Is that some sort of community charrette?
I don't know, maybe we should go together.
So since we don't know their
I
answer.
don't, as far as I know, we're kind of an ad hoc, kind of not really a committee. And so I would say it should be elected officials, but,
I would second that. I mean, we're not elected, we are appointed, and we're just sort of a advisory committee, is that an appropriate description? So I think that when I use those phrases, I'm thinking that that's the job of the select board. Yeah, that's part of the job description.
Any thoughts from any select board members on that question?
I will agree.
Okay. We done?
Yes, we got it. That answer your question, or?
Yes, sir, it does.
All right.
We'll be watching.
All right. And Vika, do you have
No, I apologize with having changed the budget twice in the last week. I focused on the full. I can get that number to you tomorrow. I have the total dollar value for this, but I don't have the percentage just of the town specific one on me.
Carol?
I will explain sort of the reasoning and the process that maybe will kind of help a little bit. So when we looked at our budget, I don't know, a week or two ago, we were up about 10%. Right? I think the entire budget, school and town combined, was up about 10%. And so we really felt that was, too significant. One of our challenges is, as you know, is that we don't know what we have, what our balance is in the undesignated fund. And so we haven't received our audit for the previous fiscal year, so we are kind of on line there. And Nika did do some calculations based on expenditures and, what she can best estimate on what the undesignated fund is. But we basically then kind of stepped back and said, what about looking at it from a target increase in the overall tax rate? And kind of went from that and backed in a certain amount of undesignated funds that we feel we're comfortable putting in without actually having received the audit. So this has kind of been a chronic problem that we don't get the audit in time to kind of really have the actual numbers. And we have over the past several years, I don't think we had a graph of it tonight, but we've added significant monies from the undesignated fund back into the budget of like 170, 200,000. 23 was 170, maybe going back 2 years, but basically 170, 200, 250, and then in fiscal year 26, we're looking to add 200,000. We actually may have more capacity than that. And when we have our special town meeting in the late summer, we may, I hope, we will be able to add some additional money from the undesignated fund towards some of the capital recommendations that the finance committee made. But we were reluctant to do that without an actual final number. I will say we've had a significant increase of over about $200,000, as Rob showed on the graph, in the capital fund contribution from last year to this year. One big chunk of that is 300,000 into the Stone Pier Wharf Reserve, so that if we were fortunate enough to get it earmarked, we have enough money in there to kind of match that and receive those funds. That kind of allocation may not have to continue to happen, and we might want to shift gears, particularly based on some of the recommendations of the finance committee, and redistribute those allocations, into the capital. Maybe more of the shorter term capital needs than these long term needs. But, so I think we basically had to back into it from a tax increase standpoint. And the debt service going down is helpful because that's given us more capacity. And Bob brought to light too the fact that I think our revenue went up 100,000, is that right? So that's pretty significant. That's partly people, more excise tax revenue, but also we raised the fees on solid waste, and we probably need to raise them some more. But we are kind of looking at trying to balance out some of the expenses, that we have with some fees that are user-based rather than just across the board. So I guess that explains kind of how we got it.
Yeah, I would add to that, in addition to the select board raising some of those fees, which is the one financial decision the select board can make without going to town meeting. The ordinance does say the fees can be raised. Fees, and I think the parking issues can be dealt with by the select board as well. But I think also our new staff have done a wonderful job at collecting in a very positive way from people who are dumping things. I think education at the transfer stations helped a bunch. And I think even though people are frankly paying more money, there's a lot of satisfaction with the way things are being done down there. the next big theme we really need to pay attention to is the wood waste, the accumulated wood and brush at the dump. Much of that tonnage comes in by professional folks, and they are doing big projects and moving a lot of wood that's probably out of proportion to the amount of taxes for that service that their clients are paying. So there's been a lot of talk about how to do the collection of fees at the town transfer station. Now that the wood waste can only be brought in when the transfer station is open, it seems like the door is open for us to begin charging for that. Concurrently, the cost of chipping when the big tub grinder comes out doubled this year, literally doubled, 22,000 to over 40,000. And it was hard to get it out here. We have no guarantees they'll come out again. We've looked at alternatives to that, and we're still looking very hard. The climate action team is looking at other ways to deal with our accumulated wood waste that would either be environmentally and financially beneficial, or perhaps just financially beneficial. That work is ongoing. And lastly, we know that wood waste is going to go up because of Emerald Ash Borer. So more to come on the revenue front, more to come on fees that will be charged for those kind of user services, and I would say in particular the wood waste situation. So back to questions instead of me talking. Any other questions or comments? John? You sound like her, but you don't make the same clicking one does.
No, I just wanted to thank for the presentation, committees and everything. The only thing, just two things, or maybe three things. One is, as far as public works, when the town purchases a building, make sure to put in the spec that it's undercoated. I know that undercoating, it just makes everything last longer. I've seen a lot of town vehicles that are rusted in it. They were undercoated at the beginning. When we got them, it would have a longer life. Two, public works, I'm kind of focused on public works because I was on the original public works committee. Use of a pressure washer to flush stuff down, especially in the winter time. You can have dry bulb pressure washers. Little things like that. They're not necessarily that expensive or industrial, but they do a lot to like remove the salt and stuff on the bottom of the trucks. And then as far as what else? I don't know, I think if we put money way ahead, like you suggested, we do well. The only thing I was going to say in regard to the waste management is years ago, I mean, when I was like 14 or 15, I was running trips to the dump for the inn, but I would do them almost every day. But you had a key, you could get in. And I'm not trying to stir any pots here, but the construction that the inn's doing right now to put in a dumpster is kind of almost in reaction to the fact that the dump's not open enough for them to get trash up there. Or I don't know if exactly if that would generate more than what the transportation can handle. But like, if you think about all the island businesses, it's gonna, as we slowly grow, luckily it's slow. I mean, there is a thing where the dump might need to be open more often to transfer some of that stuff. I just see this relationship happening, and if we have to go to having, you know, if we had a dumpster at the slow, I would hate it because stuff just sits there for too long and it smells. So, anyway.
But you drive business from the hotel to the slow bus, it's probably a good thing for you.
Yeah, right. Anyway, thank you.
All right, Aaron's gonna catch the boat, do you have a ride, or a car can take it? All right. Aaron's, any last very short question for Aaron as he's packing up? Sure.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for the great presentation.
Yeah. Other questions for people other than Aaron, but the school committee's still here? Comments? All right.
Can I make a closing remark?
You can.
So not to get all sappy here, but the last year to year and a half has been a really hard year for this town in many ways. We have all new public works employees, all new transfer station employees, half of town office staff is new. There was some turmoil between town staff and board members, And so a lot of work has gone into bringing the town to where it is, despite a lot of obstacles that have been faced. And they just keep on coming, you know, South Shore Drive is getting ready, well, I won't finish that sentence, it's not. But there's a lot of things that have come into play as these things have been getting worked through. And so I get paid to do this. The board members, whether it's the school board or the select board, they don't. And so I really do wanna give a moment of recognition towards the people that dedicate a lot of time and energy. They don't get paid for this. And so if it wasn't without all those members there, the taxes probably would be significantly higher. So thank you for all your hard work.
All right, call it a wrap. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your interest. Meeting is Saturday, June.
You didn't have to speak.